Gray Fox is like, I sucked at geometry. Fighting was the only thing I was good at.
I couldn't spell for shit, man.
In 7th grade, dropped out. It lied about his age, enlisted.
I wasn't good at sports.
That's his excuse to the principal.
Fighting could be a sport.
I couldn't play piano. I tried.
Mr. Yeager, please come to my office.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
I flunked U.S. history 3 times.
I fought the principal.
And I was good at it, too.
I won. I was 6.
Oh, man, there's your intro right there. I was 6.
Whooped his ass, 45 years old. Sitting there still having this conversation like pinned under Rex's foot.
That's like his greatest achievement.
Liquid's let him go. He's like, damn, all right. Hey, I'm Fingers.
Yo, this is Vector.
Hey everyone, this is Days Ahead.
And I'm Nitroid. You're listening to the Kojima Frequency.
You guys ever watch Married with Children?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know how Al Bundy always bragged like, I scored 3 touchdowns in a single game. That was his life achievement. It's like Gray Fox beat his principal's ass. Oh, man. So...
At least I dated the high school cheerleader.
That's a good one.
I was 6.
He dated an Olympic figure skater. That's an achievement too. And then he blew her up.
Right?
I mean, life goals.
I'm actually blanking. Was that intentional or not?
I don't think it was. No, he fired the missiles, and then she was in the crossfire.
To be...
Did he take a nap
Good job, buddy.
before and then fire the missiles?
I feel like I don't think it was intentional, and the reason why is because based on how he reacted when Snake mentioned Naomi, I feel like Gray Fox is a real sentimental guy. Before he gets his arm sliced off and stomped on, gets curb stomped by Rex, Naomi! That was he really delivered that line. That hit me hard when I was a kid.
You ever heard the Greg Eagles story about that?
No.
I'm going from memory, so I'm probably going to mess it up. But the gist is that he was Greg Eagles was the voice actor for Gray Fox and the DARPA Chief.
Right.
And he did an interview where I guess he had seen people online talking about how the voice actor for Gray Fox in Japan had passed away.
Right. I remember that.
And he misinterpreted that to think people were talking about him.
Yeah.
But he misinterpreted it in the most hilarious way possible, because on the interview he was like, yeah, gamers need to realize that Greg Eagles, he's like starts talking about himself in the third person. He's like, Greg Eagles isn't a video game character, and when the video game character dies in the game, Greg Eagles doesn't die in real life.
Wow. He got really upset,
Oh my
huh?
God.
So that was hilarious.
Voice actors are either like the most chill people or they do shit like that. There's like no in between.
Yeah, and back then it was in the mid to late 90s. If your name was found on a video game, a lot of that's why James Flinders exists, was because he wasn't comfortable with using his real name because there was like a stigma.
It was a
wasn't it not
non-union
union?
job. Yeah, it was a non-union job.
And David Hayter was Sean Barker, which is like
that's his character
Guyver.
from you're right.
From Guyver, yeah. That's right.
It was Kim May Guest, or no, Kim May West.
Is that?
I always get the two mixed up. Which one did she use?
Yeah. Wait, Kim My Guest was Mei Ling, and then Debbie Mae West was Meryl.
Yeah.
So it's like
maybe I'm confusing that. I always get mixed up there.
That definitely would throw me off. But there was that non-union, and like Jennifer Hale was gracious enough to lend her real name, but she became like a legend in voice acting. But there was like a whole deal. Like people would I think this must have been a panel I saw with somebody. I forget who it was, but they were talking about how like you didn't want to use your real name because working on video games made it look like you weren't a serious actor, and people would turn you down because of games like the original Resident Evil. It just painted games as like this is where the people who suck at acting go.
I always wondered where the live action Resident Evil actors, whatever happened to them. The ones
they've been able to track down all but 2 of them.
Right.
I think it's they can't find Jill.
Yeah.
And they can't find one of the guys from the team. I don't remember.
Yeah, that woman is so elusive.
But they did find Rebecca. Just like a few years ago.
That's kind of ironic considering how little Rebecca seems to be in the series, but
yeah, it's a shame. She's my favorite.
I was just reading about it's weird. I was reading about this the other day because with Barry's actor, I guess he's like a high school teacher or something. But he was in Japan, and some of the Capcom devs were walking down the street and saw him and were like, "Hey, do you want a gig? You look like a character in our game."
Right. No, that's the best way to do it.
And that was it.
Yeah.
Isn't that what happened to Guy? I forget how to say his name. Guy Chichi or something like that. When he was his daughter was trying out for Silent Hill 2, and they were like, "You sound like an awkward, creepy, middle-aged white dude. Why don't you play James Sutherland for us?"
Wow. Days I know you're playing Resident Evil 3. How surprised were you to see that live action cutscenes had made a comeback?
It actually reminded me a lot of the original Resident Evil, which is a little awkward because I felt like they nailed the tone of this one pretty well. But it felt so disconnected.
Anybody else playing this? No, just us.
Yeah, I finished it in one sitting, and I have unkind things to say about this game.
Yeah, I was not expecting for it to be that short, and
the length doesn't bother me. It's just how weak the scenario feels in comparison to Resident Evil 2. I would say, this might be just a matter of opinion, but to me, this game seems far more detached from its namesake than the remake of 2 was.
Okay.
There are very few similarities, and it just seems to progress at like a breakneck speed through every single area or mechanic or enemy type it introduces you to. Like by the time you've gotten used to this new thing that they've put in front of you, they're moving on to the next thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not even getting into Nemesis, and man. Okay, I know this is a Kojima podcast and we're going on Resident Evil 3, but I got to get this off of my chest here. Resident Evil 3, the original, is my favorite in the series. It might be a toss-up between that and Code Veronica. And Nemesis, in particular, is my favorite monster design. And I don't mean in Resident Evil. I mean of all monster design ever, Nemesis is my favorite.
I completely understand that, 100%.
And from the second Mr. X showed up in the Resident Evil 2 remake, I was worried that any remake they did of 3 would be undermined by how much he borrowed from Nemesis mechanically, and this game proved me absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly valid.
Nemesis is in, like, not to spoil it, so I don't want to go into too much here, but like most monsters in Resident Evil that are boss category, they evolve over time. And the original stage of Nemesis is something that changed. It's only in the original game for a certain amount of time, but it's fairly, ubiquitous through most of the game.
Yeah.
He only really starts to change near the end.
Yeah.
In this, he's in it like 3 times for a very short amount of time. He's easily avoidable, and every encounter feels scripted. And when it isn't scripted, you can almost shrug him off because it doesn't seem like he's trying very hard to get you. Yeah.
I mean, his swipes can be pretty devastating, but, when you figuring out the dodge is kind of tricky, but, when you finally get a hold of that, which kind of takes a while because you don't get a lot of opportunities to use it because the game is over before you know it. But, yeah.
And I could forgive that if there were just if the scenarios that they gave you were more fleshed out, like one thing I've been talking to friends about who have completed it is the RPD in RE2 Remake.
Right.
That's sort of your hub area to begin with. And, it sort of unlocks in a linear fashion, but in a way that gives you enough to navigate around in different ways so that if Mr. X is stalking you, you've always got more than one way out of the situation, right?
Yeah.
You learn that terrain. And then as it expands, you can use it more to your advantage, and you really get to know that. But there's nowhere like that in 3.
And that's why I like replaying Resident Evils, is because I like being able to better understand that type of like maze like scenario and optimize it over time. Whereas with this game, while I'm excited about them adding like Nightmare and Inferno, it doesn't make up for not having those gameplay scenarios where you can optimize and figure out the best routing and the best way to avoid Mr. X, or in this case Nemesis, because it's just this like one long linear path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like they didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah,
so they
I don't like his design at all.
Take Mr. X and give him a gun and make him run.
I almost feel like they had big shoes to fill, like a big precedence to fill with the RE2 remake. So with that in mind, they may have made some guidance in terms of their game design.
A friend of mine put it best, I think. This game feels like a rough draft. Like, if this had the way he put it was like, if he had been working at Capcom and the devs brought him this, he'd be like, okay, this is a good start.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. And because Resident Evil 3, well, it was called Nemesis in the States. I don't know if it was called that in Europe,
no,
but
it was called Europe, I don't know, but in Japan it was
Last Escape.
Yeah.
So, but the game still revolves around Nemesis. He's on the cover of the original game, and he's on the cover of this game too. But his character design is so terrible, you don't want to look at him.
God, I'm so glad they put those caution stickers on him, or I might not know he's dangerous.
Yeah, he does not look good in trash bags. That's like the original costume was unsettling because it was like thick leather. It looked kind of like bondage gear, so that just like it played with your mind on subtle levels. This is just and he's got these tentacles, so there's like all this subtext of like what this monster can do to you, and then this remake is like, hey, trash bags. You like Glad bags? Well, check it out.
And then.
He's hefty strong.
Going off of Nitroid's point about him transforming early, one thing that I always found scary about him was that, before him, BOW seemed, the most humane one you ever saw was Birkin G1, because he was like screaming Sherry's name and stuff.
Yeah.
Now they have this creature that is he almost seems even more dangerous when he's not mutated, because he has like a conscious mind. He deliberately targets specific folks. And,
he can use weapons. He can run. He can open doors.
Yeah.
The original tyrant could never open doors.
So for them to like immediately change him from this intelligent BOW, that is really like an evolution of the weapon. They transform him into like this liquor dog by like 2 hours in the game.
Right.
So that was disappointing. But on a positive note, oh God, I love Carlos in this.
Yeah, he's man. We should probably stop talking about it.
Yeah, probably.
We should probably, because this is just going to take. We're going to go like 2-3 hours just talking about this game.
Welcome to the Resident Evil podcast.
let me use that to segue into Metal Gear, if you guys will let me have the chance.
Do it.
Floor is yours.
Speaking of remakes, the reason why I actually even thought of this idea was because on April 1st, I think I mentioned this, the Outer Heaven Network did a Twin Snakes April Fool's run.
For people listening, let them know what the idea is.
The idea of the April Fool's run?
Or what you're segueing into. Because we know, obviously, but...
Oh, yeah. So, the topic of this week was the fourth wall, and how it's affected or how it's been implemented in Metal Gear Solid. But ironically enough, the reason why I even thought of that conversation was because I just got to see or get a refresher on all of the sort of, for lack of a better term, like dumb examples of the fourth wall in Metal Gear, which were in Twin Snakes.
Okay.
The additions, the fourth walls that they added were kind of corny, and then the ones that they that they played off of or they remade, I thought weren't very good either. But I don't want to stick with just bad examples. There's a million more good examples.
Well,
Yeah,
real quick, what would you say
copious
the
notes.
worst example is from Twin Snakes?
It's actually a tie. So
I can think of two, and I'm wondering if yours are the same as mine.
The first one is before the Psycho Mantis fight. This was one that they added, where like Psycho Mantis asked you to put the controller on the floor. In the original game, Snake didn't really acknowledge, his verbiage or his vernacular talking to the player. But it felt like Psycho Mantis was talking to you. Whereas in Twin Snakes, when you get that direction to put down the controller, the game stops, dollies to Snake, zooms in on him. Snake looks at the camera and nods at you like, "Do it, motherfucker." And I'm like, really? Because it kind of takes out the tone. I mean, that whole scene with Psycho Mantis and Twin Snakes, they took out the tone to be like edgy, I guess. But that part in particular got me. And then the second example that I had was actually during the torture scenario, where again, Ocelot's verbiage in the original, it was very clearly directed at the player, but it was it refuged in audacity in a sense that it was just dialogue. Like, it wasn't necessarily acknowledged that it was talking to the player. It was just sort of part of Kojima's whimsy that it was part of Ocelot's dialogue. In Twin Snakes, however, when he mentions the part about using the turbo controller to mention that you can't cheat on the game, he stops, looks towards the camera, and points at the player.
Yep.
And it's just like it's adding corniness in a place that I thought had a very cheeky tone.
Yep, you got the exact one. There were other little moments too that they added. They're not. One of them is quasi fourth wall breaking, or rather, it piggybacks on a fourth wall break, and the other's just, I think, kind of strange. But when Snake throws his little temper tantrum after Baker tells him he forgot Meryl's codec frequency,
Right.
Oh, I blocked that out of my mind. Thanks.
and the other, it's not fourth wall breaking, but it was just like I couldn't just ignore it. But during the second Vulcan Raven fight, when the Crow comes down like a referee and like caws at them both like it's doing a countdown.
I don't remember that one.
Wild. Yeah, it's they're both facing off against each other after they've had their little conversation, and the Crow lands behind them, and it looks over at Snake and caws, and then it looks over at Vulcan Raven and caws, and then it lowers its head like it's about to take off, and then when it takes off, the fight starts.
That
So it's like a boxing referee. It just comes out.
Yeah,
It's like, I want a
exactly.
good, clean fight.
Go!
Yeah.
Are you ready? Oh, are you ready?
Gloves up. Touch gloves.
I had no idea.
Guns.
Touch guns.
Okay, maybe I love that part
Vulcan
now.
touches his chain gun, or his minigun with Snake's soak off.
Right.
Nothing below the belt.
I had no idea that was there. I completely forgot about it. But that now that I'm hearing about it, that sounds amazing. That's
Yeah, maybe I need to rethink that one.
that sounds awesome. I liked I liked everything about Twin Snakes. There was literally nothing that I didn't like. I liked when Ocelot pointed directly to the camera, and because here's the thing: is that as a Metal Gear Solid fan, and this is specifically something that I feel happened in Metal Gear Solid and not the original Metal Gears, but I want the fourth wall to be broken as much as possible. That's one of the reasons why I play this game, why I used to play him, was because the reason why the fourth wall exists in the first place is because it was I just said because like 12 times in the same sentence. I gotta work my shit out. So the reason why the fourth wall exists is, it comes from stage acting, and you don't want to break the fourth wall. You don't want to create or let the audience in on the illusion that this isn't really happening. And something immersion, blah blah blah. But Metal Gear would just take that and throw it the hell out the window, and I appreciated that, and that was what drew me to the series. Was it was completely unlike other things. And so when Twin Snakes was like, hey, you like fourth wall breaks, we're going to take everything you liked about Metal Gear Solid and crank it up to 11, even if you asked for it or not. And it's like that didn't detract from the experience, but I definitely understand your point of view.
Why it detracted for me when it comes to fourth wall breaking, I feel like there's a threshold that once you cross it, it's hard to take the material seriously again.
Wait a second. When did we ever take Metal Gear Solid seriously?
Well, maybe it's not so much that you take it seriously, but you can kind of accept it on its terms.
Okay.
And it definitely takes itself seriously to a degree.
I don't think Twin Snakes does. Twin Snakes
like, absolutely does not take itself seriously.
Yeah.
Right.
But MGS1 most certainly
does. that tone is a whole nother level.
And when MGS1 has those moments where it's breaking the fourth wall, it does so in kind of a subtle, might not be the right word, but it's not playing them up as a gag.
Okay.
It's doing it on a level that it's almost more creepy than amusing.
Okay.
I'd say it's more just
It
like
never
it's
pulls you
instructions
out of
to the
it.
player, really. Like it's just like, hey, you need to press X here to to do this.
Okay, here's a way to think about
experience
it.
this, you have to put the controller down.
In MGS1, when it breaks the fourth wall, it never breaks immersion.
Yeah.
Where Twin Snakes does. When
That's a great way to
Ocelot
describe it, yeah.
when Ocelot points at you, when Snake nods at you, that's taking you out of the moment and going like, ha ha, but the game MGS1 never really laughs at itself in that way. It certainly laughs at itself, just not in that way.
Yeah, Twin Snakes is like direct wink at the camera type shit.
Right, and that's why it loses me anyway.
Yeah. But I think that's the whole game is just turning things up like that. So I don't really like let that deter my enjoyment for it.
The headcanon I've always seen fans go with is that MGS1 is what happened and Twin Snakes is like Otacon telling the story at a bar.
Yeah.
I love that interpretation, yeah.
That's a good one.
Like, and then he totally backflipped over a missile, man.
I was there, I saw it.
It's like, yeah, it's just like his Japanese animes.
He cleared the
one's
whole
truth,
door threshold.
The other's the legend.
And then Snake and Raven were standing there face to face, and a crow stood between them and was like, "Oh, are you ready? Oh."
Fingers, was that door reference? Was that a reference to Snake like fucking jumping the door?
Yeah, he jumped the whole threshold, cleared it.
Oh man, I was talking to a friend about that scene today. We were talking about like Grubhub drivers, porters. Like I had a Grubhub driver like just not even show up. I think he just straight up took my Wendy's. And I was saying, I have an IP camera though, and that's how I knew he didn't even bother to come over. And it reminded me of that scene when Ocelot's looking at the camera, like in Snake. So it's especially funny in Twin Snakes because all that flipping, and Ocelot just kind of clearly sees him in the camera. In the corner there.
Do you think Ocelot was like low key, like Jesus Christ, dude? Really?
Yeah.
The point I said
I still saw you.
The reason why I said that Grubhub story is because basically that's how I felt like looking at my camera and a motherfucker wasn't there with my Wendy's.
Damn. I had Wendy's yesterday. I know exactly how important Wendy's is. I'm not even kidding. Like, if I ordered Wendy's and didn't get it, I'd be devastated.
Have you seen where people are like asking questions on their door and like having yes and no on the like near the bottom and Amazon delivery?
Yeah, but like,
people
did
are,
Carol
putting their
Baskin's kill her husband? And it'll be like, leave it on the left or right. All the packages are on the right.
Wow.
I feel like there's a real opportunity to do some Death Stranding jokes, but
Oh yeah, eventually I'm gonna leave like keep on keeping on one of these notes. I just haven't had a chance yet.
Does Death Stranding have any fourth wall breaks?
Yes, it does actually. And I did list some of the. Well, I only listed one right now. But it's actually towards the end of the game. And a lot of people think that it's a gag on Metal Gear Solid 5. So towards the end, when you get to that segment where you're waiting on the beach for like 4 hours for Amelie, you can still do call-outs with the touchpad. And if you keep doing call-outs, Norman Reedus is like, hello, is anybody out there? You know, it's been a damn long time. And then if you keep pressing it, he says something like, is this even finished? Like, is this, you know, he's like, what's going on here? Like, can someone quit the game for me? And people like to think that that's a gag towards Metal Gear Solid 5, where, you know, folks got to the end, they were in the middle of chapter 2, and they were like, wait, this is it?
Yeah.
That's pretty hilarious.
And there were also I remember seeing when you're in the safe houses, he'll look at the camera and point at things, you know, like directly at you, giving you instructions and stuff.
Like if he needs to go to the bathroom or something.
Does he do that? I don't know. I remember
he'll point at the bathroom and then act like he's praying.
If he hasn't peed for a while, yeah.
Oh my god!
If you stare at his crouch, he'll like give you the finger first, like shove the camera back up, and if you do it enough, he'll just straight up punch you in the face.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. See, I want games to do more of that.
And I think like the interesting thing is, I think a lot of that I felt like probably developed organically. Because I remember Norman Reedus saying I forget, like at some Comic-Con panel or some convention panel, that he would just, you know, do some sort of mannerism or just sit there and, you know, be Norman Reedus and act, you know, like however he acted. And Kojima would, you know, observe his behavior and be like, wait, hold on, can you do that again? But, you know, in front of the cameras. And I wonder how much of that resulted in some of those like
put the suit on.
Easter eggs. It's just like, Kojima, don't look at my dick. I don't know.
Yeah, how did that evolve? Like, what are you doing with that camera there, boss?
You know, it's so funny. I was thinking so much about the beach example. I didn't think about the a million examples in the safe room. And then I think the last one, I'm not even really sure if you'd consider this a fourth wall breaking, but if your chiral levels, if they're really high and you haven't like used the bathroom or showered or do anything to just kind of clean that off or clean it off of Norman Reedus, you will have certain hallucinations. Some are kind of fourth wall breaking, others...
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Is that exactly what causes the weird like nightmare sort of things?
Yeah, so the more you kind of
I wondered what triggered those. I didn't know.
Wow.
The more you'll have those hallucinations. There's one where like Kojima will come out of a puddle of like chiral tar and grab Norman Reedus by the legs.
I knew I saw him. I knew I saw his face in one of the trailers. I knew it.
Kojima fans are like, go ahead.
Knew it.
I love the one where I was gonna say I like the one where the baby is like facing away from him in the pod and he taps it and then it turns around and it's like Deadman's face on it.
And then there's one
that's
if
gross.
you look in the mirror.
So
like it's almost like a horror movie where like Norman Reedus will look away for a moment and then look back and Higgs will be right behind him.
Whoa. So that reminds me of, and going back to Twin Snakes, you know, that Twin Snakes was developed by Silicon Knights, and before Twin Snakes, they made Eternal Darkness for the GameCube, and that had that like sanity system where, you know, if your insanity level was too high, it would start tricking you into thinking that like the volume on your TV was going down.
That game was nuts.
Yeah, that game is so much fun.
Yeah, I wonder if they brought any of that, you know, like what they did from with Eternal Darkness into Twin Snakes.
The Twin Snakes remake. Credit where credit is due. They are the developers of Eternal Darkness, and some of the sanity effects did end up being translated into the Psycho Mantis fight. like the camera tilting, the volume adjustments.
That is the one part of Twin Snakes that I feel was kind of an improvement, was the room tilting during the fight.
Yeah, shame they never got to make another one of those.
They did a Kickstarter for a spiritual successor, but it didn't really get anywhere.
I tried. Dennis. He was under so much flack though, for stuff that he said, and the lawsuit with Epic.
Right.
That's another story though. But yeah, and so I wonder if Kojima is a fan of Eternal Darkness. I didn't know about the hallucinations you could have in Death Stranding.
Well, what was the time frame on that? I wonder if Eternal Darkness was what caught their eye.
What do you mean?
I don't know when Eternal Darkness was made, but was that?
I think that was 2002.
Oh,
you mean like, was that what made Kojima think hey, these guys should do the remake? I don't know.
Yeah, because Twin Snakes was 2004, and I know the game was developed in something like a little over a year, so I wonder if Eternal Darkness was what caught their eye and was like, made them go like, maybe these guys are the ones we should give this to. They've got some creative ideas.
That's a really good question.
Came out of a conversation between him and I think Shigeru Miyamoto, where they're like, when are you going to put a Metal Gear back on there? But I didn't even think about the process. How did they choose a developer?
Yeah. It was probably just like, here's the only developer that we own that isn't doing anything at the time.
Fourth wall breaking too. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. Let me introduce you to these guys. And then,
so let me ask you this: for each of you, outside of Twin Snakes, though, what would be your favorite fourth wall breaking moment out of the Metal Gear series?
Definitely not Psycho Mantis's appearance in 4. Vibrations back. Yeah, go away. I feel like 4 had way worse fourth wall breaks than Twin Snakes. That's just me.
4 had not to take the mic away from you here, but 4 had one that I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but I feel like it might have been. But there's not enough there. It's not developed enough out to really say. Okay, so you know how MGS2 had the game over screen where it
Fish and Mail
looked like normally it looks like a digital readout. It shows some stats on where you are. Yeah, and then it gets weird near the end, right?
Yeah.
It looks like software crashing.
Oh, okay.
And then 3 does the time paradox where it all sort of fades away slowly.
Yes. Can I answer this pop quiz?
Do you remember what 4's is?
I hope I'm right on this one.
They were flashbacks, right?
I'm assuming you're referring to close to the end of chapter 5. Where if Snake dies, towards the end, while you're trying to, during the sort of cumulative moment or whatever the word is, if you die, instead of saying continue and exit, it says continue and exist. And if you click exist, Liquid Ocelot comes on. He's like, it's not over yet, and then it switches to exit. And it's they never really give you context as to what that's supposed to represent or the message. But it's not part of the plot. It's just a gameplay mechanic that directly affects the player. Okay, please explain.
Okay, so I would argue that they do give you context, just not directly.
Clarify.
So taken away from the bit in Act 5, the game over screen is just you have flashes of your experiences, your memories, and then it goes to static. Right? It looks like a signal that's been cut. Okay.
Yes.
Have you ever died in MGS4 and then called Rose?
This moment or this death, and I'm coming back.
Yeah, and you get different responses the more you call her. And one of the responses you get, he talks about that, and he also talks about seeing himself from the third person. And she speculates that it might be a mild case of depersonalization disorder, like he's becoming detached from who he is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know much about this. I've just done some very cursory reading. But from what I understand, a common symptom in depersonalization disorder is something that feels kind of like you've lost a signal. They call it visual snow. And I'm wondering if this was kind of an attempt to communicate that, where the whole game is about Snake's sense of self, right? Sense being the key word, his will, his personal, his soul, whatever you want to call it. So if he's losing that, if he's struggling with that grasp on who he is as a person, maybe that's kind of what they were going for there. It just didn't completely come through.
Like a counter question, I guess. So with that whole concept of depersonalization, and even though it didn't really seem fleshed out, do you think that may have had some ties into some of the stuff we talked about earlier about Kojima kind of disassociating with Metal Gear Solid 4? Like, do you think it might be a representation of him sort of depersonalizing as he tries to get out of this series?
Maybe.
Wow.
I mean, every time he's made a game, he's kind of put bits of his personal life in there.
Right.
And I mean, every developer does this. Every director, every auteur, whatever you want to say, everybody does this. There's bits of yourself in the work you do. Kojima tends to turn it up to 11. He'll talk about how Metal Gear Solid was born out of him playing hide and seek with his kid and trying to figure out what to pass on. And MGS4 did seem very much kind of like a game about getting away from Metal Gear.
Right.
So possibly. I mean, it's one of those things that I don't know. Maybe you'd have to ask him, I guess.
No, I think that's a really interesting and apt observation, because that was the reason why Snake, has osteoporosis, because Kojima can't do handstands anymore.
Yeah, and he would always say that, like, Snake is me. Snake, I'm old. I'm getting old. Snake is getting old.
I mean, this is all conjecture because, again,
so
what were you going to say, Dave?
Until like 5 minutes ago, this has just been like a creepy Easter egg for me. So thank you for the additional explanation.
Yeah, like I said, I have no idea if that's what they were going for, but there seemed to be a lot of ideas in MGS4 that are sort of flirted with, but then never elaborated on, and this strikes me as one of them. Like, not to drift back into Resident Evil, but Nemesis and the way he was handled kind of reminds me of how the Gecko were handled in Metal Gear Solid 4.
Okay.
And how right at the start it seems like they had something really clever and creative, and these things were going to stalk you on the battlefield and follow you everywhere.
Yeah.
And then throughout the rest of the game, they're almost non-existent.
Right. Damn.
And when he first talked about the Gecko and what they were and what they could do and what they were shooting for, I was thinking, oh man, this is going to be like, velociraptors hunting you almost, Right,
exactly.
And that sounded really cool to me. And then that first segment of MGS4 in the Middle East where, the initial battle's going on and the Gecko are jumping down and attacking everywhere.
Right.
It's a little sandboxy because depending on where you go, they'll show up in interesting places and like peek into the upper floors of buildings, and it's really cool. And then they never really come back to that. There's like one part in Act 4 where they kind of play with that when it shows up on the level where Hal's lab is, but that's it.
Yeah, well, the same can be said about like a lot of the mechanics in 4 though. There's like that first act is, that's the selling point. All the stuff that they had shown before the game launched, and then the rest of the game, like even the second act doesn't really compare to the first in terms of like the things that you can do and the mechanics that are available. So yeah,
I think that gives it a lot of replayability though. Like you will like find yourself in different scenarios like a lot in these games. Especially, if you decide to take different routes,
just like Resident Evil,
or trying to go out of your way to get different results out of it.
Right.
Resident Evil does have that like replayability factor where I think that's the whole point. It's like you're gonna get those like upgrades and different abilities and stuff, and then try to run it quicker.
Do geckos respond? Right. You know how you can unlock the big boss outfit? It's just like you're flank stake big boss and you scare all the soldiers. Does that have any effect on the geckos? I've never.
Yeah.
I
think they ignore. I think they don't fall for it. I can't remember if I've tried it or not, but I know in one of the trailers, they showed Snake playing dead with the dead camo or whatever it's called. I can't remember the name.
Oh right.
And it looks at him and then it scans him and then tries to stomp on him. So I think that's more or less what happens in the game too. So sorry, I kind of took us on a tangent there.
Uh,
Vector, you were saying about fourth wall breaking moments. What was your pick?
For the best one?
Yeah. Or your favorite, rather.
Favorite?
Yeah, either or.
I guess I'd have to go with the sorrow fight and needing to take the revival pill
really
to get out of that boss battle.
Ooh, that was good.
Where you kind of have to think outside of the game's UI.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to think in terms of the UI.
In terms of it, yeah, because you can't take it for granted.
I remember when I first played that fight and like being really excited because you have all your guns and they all have unlimited ammo, and I felt like a kid in a candy store. I was like, yeah, and I'm like re-killing all the dudes I had killed, and like, hey, I ate that fish, and and then I'm like, what the hell do I do?
Remind me, I might be wrong about this, but I seem to remember if you ate a vulture after the vulture had eaten a guard, then when you get to the sorrow, isn't there a guard that walks by that says something like, you ate me, or something like that?
And then if you shoot
I remember that.
He's like, you made me useless.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
Always had a lot of guys that were just like holding their neck. They're just like, slit all their throats.
Yeah.
Does it actually, has anybody tested to see if that caps out?
What do you mean? Like
I think it's just every guard you've killed at that point. I mean,
right,
but like, what's the cap on kills? How long can that segment go?
Well, it doesn't like continues don't count, right? So it's not like you can continuously stack guards. It's like there's a max number of guards that were in the game up to that point, so that's as
you
long.
Can keep getting alerts, getting called in different areas.
Like, I wonder if that's like
and just keep
along with obviously getting the dog tag. If that's like a unique ID that would be affiliated with that count.
Well, dog tags weren't in MGS3.
I know, but maybe there's still some way of tracking. Like there's only a certain number.
So you mean like every guard's unique or something like that?
Not every guard's unique. More like there's only a certain number of kills that register for the sorrow
you can't
fight.
Get duplicates, yeah.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't imagine it's a true count.
Yeah.
It will go on for a very long time, though. I remember playing like Pretty Lethal one time, and I was just like, "Oh my god, why did I kill so many people?" Like that was the first time I ever thought about like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't kill so many people."
Unless you're doing a speed run, then you just take the revival pill right at the start, and you're done. And that's why I like it. It's like you have to know that you have to actually do that, and it you kind of feel smart for figuring it out. Like, oh, I don't have to walk down this whole river and die. I can just wake myself up right now.
That's when Metal Gear does its best, I think, when it makes you feel smart for figuring one of those things out.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, like
there's
when you
a
think
moment
to put on a box and then like get in the truck and then they just like take you somewhere. You're like, oh my god, I'm genius.
Yeah.
There's a moment in Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance, in one of the Snake Tales, Eternal Gazer. Have you played that?
Yeah.
And the idea is that you're stuck in a VR simulation and you keep getting messages telling you, Snake, wake up, Snake, wake up.
Right.
And to get out during an actual VR mission, you have to like pause the game and hit exit to continue the story.
Have you ever played? I've never played this, so I'm
not that's awesome.
but have you heard of the X-Men game for the Sega Genesis? So, I think I don't remember.
Which one? Was it just called X-Men?
Was it like Gems or something?
X-Men, yeah.
Wait, did you say X-Men?
If I describe this, I feel like it might.
Okay, for some reason I thought you said X-Files, and I was like, what?
For me.
That'd be cool too.
There was one level where you get to the end and there's no exit, but there's a screen, and like you're told like, hey, you have to reset Magneto's like computer or something like that. And a lot of people were confused, but the trick was you actually had to press the reset button on your Genesis. And when you reset that, it proceeded to the next level. And I mean, you have to have a lot of faith in your console to do that.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, oh man, that's terrifying. I know there are people who legitimately turned their game console off when like the kernel told them to.
I can't imagine. Really? People really did that? Oh man.
No, it's just it commands you to reset the computer now. And then when you press the reset button, it shows you that green message.
Yeah, because that was like a function with a lot of those consoles. It was like a soft reset. It wasn't like a hard reset. It was like that did. There was a save system in certain games where you would have to do that too. You would have to like hold reset and then hit power or something.
Yeah.
I am amazed that they were able to pull that off. Like, I wonder what sort of code is running to enable that.
I bet, just like Finger said, how it's like a soft reset, and so there must be information stored in RAM that the game
That's
accesses.
what it did. Yeah, it like held onto the RAM in the cartridge or in the.
Right.
Better not hold that reset button too long.
Yeah, Maniac Mansion I know had a system that was like that. Like I guess some of those things had the little batteries in them for the RAM.
Yeah, cartridges.
And plus, this was back when was there save data? Were there like game saves on that as well?
There was saves on Maniac Mansion. Yeah, that's how you would save.
Well, I mean on X-Men. So like, did it have save files on the cartridge, or was it one of those one and done type games where you?
Hold on, let me check let me check the main menu.
Because that might be another way of doing it. Like it remembers a state.
Right. I'm looking at the main menu, and if you see the word password, then you know.
Then nope.
Yeah.
That's just amazing, though, that they were able to do that.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
You probably couldn't get away with that now.
Well, no, because the way consoles work.
Anyway.
I wondered if that game was released on like Virtual Console or something, how that worked.
Ooh.
Yeah, how could you emulate that?
Hit soft reset on the emulator.
Yeah, maybe.
Can you do that?
No, there's normally a button that it says soft reset and hard reset.
Right. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. I had this idea a while back, years ago. Me and a friend, we were putting together a design doc, and I was, she had this idea for a boss that like was blind. they were blind, but they could hear you really well. And I was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if like the way you had to beat them was you had to go into the options menu and turn the volume all the way down so that the boss couldn't hear you? And we thought it was a great idea. It was completely inspired by Metal Gear Solid, because it was like,
that's pretty great.
It like the fact that those games break the fourth wall is, I mean, it in a lot of ways it's everything, because the games are, what's the word? They're self-aware. They know that they're games, and like the way my brain works, I always appreciate that. That's why I feel like it's a thing with a lot of people. That's why Deadpool is such a popular character, is because he just completely disregards the fourth wall. And I feel like, for me, it doesn't break the experience as much as people think, as long as you set those expectations, like even in Twin Snakes, yes, it breaks the immersion to have a character point directly at the camera, but if you establish that this is that kind of game, then you still build that rule set and your brain gets accustomed to that, which can also be immersive in its own right. That's just
there's also the in Metal Gear. There's also it sort of sets that expectation in subtle ways too, that it's aware it's a game, but it never shows its hand right away. Because to explain what I mean, right off the bat in MGS1, the Colonel's telling you to press the select button.
Yeah.
Obviously, Snake doesn't know what the hell the select button is, but you do. So he's not really talking to Snake so much as he's telling the player what to do.
Right.
So some games have done this before, but not as a setup. They're just dumping information on you. They're telling you how to play. Metal Gear seems to be doing it not just to give you information, but to kind of set up to set you up for later. You start to take for granted that it's talking to you about these small things, so that when it talks to you about these big things, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
And now that I think about it, since you mentioned that, like a lot of games have to do that. If you have a tutorial section and you have a partner character or someone talking in your ear, they'll usually reference buttons on the controller or like gameplay mechanics in order to teach you how to play the game. And it's kind of like a necessity in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was just playing Resident Evil 4 a little last night, and right in the beginning, oh, what's her name? Hunnigan? Is that her name?
Yep.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, she's like, hang on, Leon, I'm sending you a playing guide.
Nice. Yeah.
There's a lot of Metal Gear references in that.
Four ripped off. I mean, I don't want to say ripped off, but there was a lot of inspiration and homage to Metal Gear that honestly I didn't expect that. But I wonder if that in and of itself was a fourth wall break, because like the walkie-talkie screen in RE4 is so clearly a codec.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I just forget what it was called, walkie-talkie or transceiver, whatever their word for it. It was like, oh, it's a codec.
Like some off-brand.
Yeah, Chinese knockoff codec.
Which I think we've talked about. Have we talked about the origin of that term before?
A little bit, we did, and
Blaustein
that
that was Blaustein's term, and it's still being used in Death Stranding.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I don't know of exactly what the actual definition for codec is. I know it has to do with
coder. It's coder decoder.
Video
it's
files.
short for coder decoder.
Okay, and that has something to do with video files.
Or any type of signal conversion, where it's encoding it and then it's decoding it.
So,
well, that's pretty clever.
So let me ask, like, canon-wise, I know it's supposed to be a vibration in your ear, and it's supposed to be as if the person's, like, speaking right directly at you. But how is it, like, in the context of the universe, how does that affect, like, visually? Is there no visuals? Because this is
God, I was afraid you were going to ask this.
Well, the reason I ask is, in the context of this conversation, is one example I was going to bring up. Not my favorite, but one example I was going to bring up to your point was how they kind of utilize the codec in sort of a fourth wall way. The example I was thinking of was when Liquid, like, takes off his hairband and his sunshades.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, is this fourth wall breaking? Like, is this, is this a play on the mechanics versus what's happening in the universe? So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And he even asks him if he liked his sunglasses. So
yeah,
it's a great line. It's a classic.
You can. I can accept it more for 2 than I can for 1, since it's nano machines in 2.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just Metal Gear has this kind of quasi-reality state where, yes, it's happening, but it's not happening, and you just have to accept that it's somewhere in the middle of these two poles.
Right. Well, the development reason is, hey, we got a shit ton of exposition to deliver to the player, but we have like a negative development animation budget, so that's why the codec exists, was to deliver plot while saving the animators time and money. From a lore standpoint, it obviously there's a ton of holes, but it's like that's one of the things about Metal Gear is that in a sense it's aware that it's a game. You're aware that it's a game. At times, Metal Gear is aware that you, the player, are playing it, and so you just kind of have to, like, why does the codec exist? It's because it's a video game. So that's my explanation.
No, that's about all the explanation you need, really.
Yeah.
It's Snake sitting there and like Liquid's like just taking off all of his stuff, and he's just like sitting there, doesn't know the difference. He's like, "Ha!" He's like, "What?
Are you still there?
What'd you do?"
Miller, what happened to your accent?
Oh, I took off my sunglasses and my jacket. It's supposed to be this big.
This is a radio, right?
I thought we were doing video chat. Sorry.
He's doing like RPing. He's like, I took off my glasses and hairband.
Well, I mean, Snake can see the radar, so I feel like the codec is also, he can see that with nanomachines.
Yeah, there's something there's something there that's implied that we don't see, and I don't think we're really supposed to take it literally, but at the same time they address it like it's literally, so it's in that superposition of real and not.
Yeah, it's like there is a camera set up somewhere, because you see, especially like when when Otacon like gets all big and stuff, when he figures out that there's 4 people on the, and he's like, he gets all big on the camera.
Otacon, I can see your nostrils.
I'm going to give you a pseudoscience nonsense explanation, right?
Go.
There's no camera, but the nanomachines that are in the codec user's body it sends a snapshot, a 3D snapshot to the other person, kind of like how like that Ben Affleck Daredevil movie when it rains and you can see Jennifer Aniston for the first time. Not Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Garner.
That'd make that movie even weirder.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. The nanomachines, it's just like it makes a point cloud 3D model of whoever's talking, and it sends it to the receiver. Shit,
I can live with that.
I always pictured it like that, like a Google Glass type deal.
Okay.
Where you just kind of see it in the corner of your eye.
Yeah, but how do you see the other person? Because they'd be wearing one too, right?
I mean, I assume that like Naomi and them have got like monitors that they're looking at.
Yeah. Okay, this is not worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
It's really
the people on the no, it's exactly what we need to be talking about. The people on like the ships and stuff are definitely like watching everything. Like when they get calls, they're all sitting there monitoring.
So here's the question though, right? When you call Colonel, when Snake calls Colonel, which is you calling Colonel, how does Colonel see what you look like?
Maybe he sees what the Soliton radar sees, so he's talking to like a white dot.
What?
This is one of those questions where when are you supposed to take Metal Gear at its word, at face value, literally, and when are you not supposed to?
Right.
Generally we can agree that when we're talking about character histories, we're taking that literally. And generally we can agree that when a character is giving Snake instructions about which buttons to press, like select and square and X, we're not supposed to take it literally. But these kind of questions are in between those two somewhere. That's where that's where the sauce is, like that's the magic of what makes these games work, I think.
There's also the headcanon that states that the games, like Snake is playing a game, and that's why Colonel references those things like press the action button and all that is because it's either a VR simulation or there never was a Metal Gear. There's only you playing the game.
Dun, dun, dun.
Isn't there like a cameo or something at the end of Ghost Babel, where at the end, like post credits, you see this message that's like, Jack, this is Colonel, like.
It's it's when you complete all of the extra missions.
Okay, so it's not at the end of the story.
And you're talking to someone named Number 4, which a lot of people assumed would mean one of the 12 Patriots. And he says, your time has almost come, Jack. You're now at the skill level that Solid Snake was when he took down Galluade, or when he infiltrated Galluade.
Right.
And so this was prior to MGS2 coming out.
No way.
There was some weird stuff like that where they were teasing MGS2 before MGS2 was even announced. So
Makes sense.
Did you ever get 100% in the VR missions for MGS1? Not the ones included with standard MGS1, but the standalone VR missions.
Yeah, with the one you could do like a 5-second pick of Metal Gear Ray or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, you get like blueprints and it's like confidential, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Would you consider that a fourth wall break, or is that just like? I guess not, right?
Not really.
Like teetering between fourth wall breaks and Easter eggs.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Metal Gear has a lot
question.
of both. So
yeah, when does the Easter egg become the fourth wall break and vice versa?
I think
it's just whether or not it's addressing the audience.
One of my favorites, I guess, it's like. I mean, it eventually gets answered if you keep calling Colonel, but just Meryl's codec being on the back of the box. Mm-hmm. I thought that was
that's a good one.
Pretty.
That's the one everybody
me the
remembers
hell off.
too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially if you rented the game and didn't have the box at first. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Well, time to go through every single one.
Yeah, no, that's a friend of mine. That's how he played the game. He just went digit by digit until he got to the right one.
Part of the reason they did that was as an anti-piracy measure.
Right.
But then they do eventually give it to you. So that's why I was thinking about that, and I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a very good one. It was more so of an anti-piracy measure in Metal Gear 2 with the tap codes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. No, a lot of games used to do that, and they'd be pretty elaborate. Like there was a decoder ring that you needed to play one of the Monkey Island games.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, because I read an interview with Kojima one time that said, like, he considers, like, the game to be everything that comes with it, including the box, the manual, all of that. And so he tried to incorporate those things into the game, but then I guess stuff happened where it's like, okay, well, more people are going to be renting the game. They might not have access to the box or the manual, so he had to cut it out. Renting
is illegal in Japan, isn't it?
Essentially, it's illegal. It's not like there's no law against it, but it's like, because you can, it's ridiculous. You can rent CDs. You can go to a shop. You can go to a shop, rent a CD, and right there at the cash register, there are blank CDs that you can buy, and then you like, that's
amazing.
Completely common. But renting games was, because of Nintendo, and I hate them so much, they essentially made it effectively illegal. But it's not like from what I understand, it's not officially illegal.
That's one of the reasons that a lot of those game cafes have been shut down, right? Is because of Nintendo?
That I don't know about.
I remember reading, a lot of these smaller cafes and bars where people would go to play retro video games. They're having trouble staying in business because there's legislation that prevents them from doing that.
Yeah, there was.
And it has to do with that, like it's related to that no rental thing.
That's really interesting. I need to look into that, because there was one that I went to. It was called Space Capsule in Osaka. Really cool place. Small hole in the wall. And I heard that they had to shut down. I'm sure they're not open now because coronavirus. But
yeah,
I need to follow up on those guys and see if they're still around. That's interesting.
Yeah, you'll want to fact check me on that, but I know I've seen articles talking about something similar to that, where it has to do with, like, because people can play them sort of a la carte while they're at the store, that somehow falls under the same umbrella legality as rentals. So yeah, Days, your turn. What's your favorite fourth wall break?
Oh gosh, it's a really hard question for me. Okay, so before Metal Gear even came out, one of my biggest fears, like childhood fears, weirdly enough, was like video games going sentient and attacking me, like, or just like working against me, I guess, in a way.
Oh man, you are in the wrong franchise for that.
I know, it's. I feel like I'm masochistic. I think this proves my masochism. But with that being said, I think the one that kind of affected me the most, and this was my favorite, was, obviously Psycho Mantis. Because it was like a deliberate attack on my fears, or a deliberate manifestation of my fears. Just how deep the secrets go with that, how you can, unlock little tidbits depending on what's on your save file. And then also the fact that you can completely circumvent, some of the fourth wall aspects all entirely, whether that's just changing your controller, which is technically a fourth wall thing, or just shooting off the mask on his statues. So given how granular it is and how many nightmares it gave me, I'm probably gonna go with Psycho Mantis. And then as a close second, applying that same fear, the AI kernel, which wasn't as bad, because the AI kernel couldn't directly attack me, but goddamn, do I have that like skull codec image kind of ingrained in my head for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's my lock screen on my phone.
Oh, even better. Yeah.
Fingers, you're up.
Like I said, the on the back of the CD case was definitely a good one for me. I remember having it right there next to me. I was just like, oh, like because I owned it and just like flipped it over. I was like, haha, there it is.
Not to stray too far out of Metal Gear, but since we're on fourth wall breaks, all three of you have played Snatcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love when it's very early in the game when you're at the abandoned factory, And the Mark II's like, hey, do you hear that? Turn your volume up.
Oh, damn it. Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you forgot
And
to
so
turn your
you
volume down.
crank it up so you can hear it, and then the game lowers its own volume to normalize it. So
Right.
that when the bomb goes off, it cranks it back up and blows your speakers out. Yeah. And Gillian's like, oh, my ears are ringing. And Metal's like, yep, that's because you forgot to turn your volume down.
I wonder, I would, if I blew some speakers over some shit like that.
Bass, I would not be a Metal Gear fan right now.
Lawsuit.
Yeah. Seriously.
That is not
and
the
also
weirdest.
hearing damage.
Oh, jeez. Especially if you're wearing headphones.
Right.
That is not the weirdest fourth wall break that was planned for Snatcher.
Oh, yeah?
This never made it past the drawing board, but an idea that Kojima floated at one point was, can we coat the CD in some kind of material that when the disc spins and warms up, the player will smell blood?
Oh, man.
So that if you're near a corpse, we spin the CD up hard and you smell blood.
Right.
Fuck.
Obviously,
I
this did not pan out for several reasons, but
man,
like that's how this guy's mind works.
That sounds like one of those classic behind the scenes. We thought Kojima was joking, but he was actually serious.
Right.
I do remember they were going for that though, like across different games. They wanted to like introduce smell. Like there was like a whole campaign for. I remember reading that in like a Game Pro at one point.
MGS2s, they wanted to do temperature. They wanted, Kojima was talking about how, I wish, I've never been able to find the interview again, so if anybody can find it and let me know, please do. But he talked about how they were trying to figure out if they could have a special controller made that would change temperature.
right.
So if you were like trying to detect the bombs, for example, it would get warmer to let you know you were close by.
It sounds like something that would be better used in MGS1 because Alaska, and then you have like the furnace and changing the card keys. Yeah,
Because
I know they make. They used to make controllers that had fans in them to prevent your hands from sweating.
Right,
But,
right. But if you did that, wouldn't it
anymore.
just the sound would be a bigger indicator than the temperature?
I mean, you could probably use that to your advantage. Like originally the cell phone was only supposed to vibrate, but then playtesters thought they were taking damage from somewhere, and so they had to add a ringtone.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it would just vibrate, and people were like, "Oh, who's hurting me?" That's why it beeps.
I was kind of irked they changed the ringtone from the Japanese version.
Did they? I didn't know about that.
In the US version, the ringer is just like a standard little, ringtone. There's nothing special about it. But in Japan, it's like a chip tune of the MGS2 theme.
I have a theory about why they did that.
Okay.
And it's less of a theory and more just a blind ass guess. But
Go.
At that point in 2001, the cell phones in Japan were so far ahead of anything in the States or the Western countries. Like their cell phones, oh my God. You should look up pictures. Look up old school Vodaphones. These things were huge, and that's where like cell phone charms came from. So I'm sure in Japan they were completely used to like having a song for a ringtone. But in Western countries, since cell phones hadn't caught up yet, I'm sure it had to be made a standard ringtone because that's because people just weren't used to having a song come from your phone.
That makes perfect sense. I would
That's
not
my
be
guess.
surprised if that was the reason.
I like that song.
I miss that. Just pay the licensing fee, guys. Come on.
Seriously. If Sony had to pay that stupid dude so that they could get controller vibration back, because that's a patent. Hey, speaking of patents that have expired, you guys ever play like a Crash Bandicoot or something, or a game where you could play a mini game while it was loading?
Oh, I know where you're going with this. Yep.
Well, the patent for that expired, so people are allowed to do that again. So
Thank
spread the
goodness.
word. Yeah.
Doesn't Nintendo have a patent on sanity effects?
Do they?
I think they might. That sounds familiar. Just like Michael Jackson owns Happy Birthday.
Yeah, I've heard that through Eternal Darkness, they got the patent for sanity effects, which was part of the reason why it's been so hard.
You know what? I have actually seen the patent document. I've seen it.
So let me ask you this: Did Fear Effect have to license that?
See, I think it was. I've never played Fear.
Or was it distinct enough?
I think it was distinct in a sense that there was like a metric involved. So like fourth wall breaking that would be associated with some sort of like bar or mechanic, where the more you lose it, the more, the fourth wall breaks, or the more your character is affected.
I hate that. I really do. When it
don't
comes
remember
to creative mediums, it's like patenting a color. Let people paint with what they want to paint with.
Yeah, no, that should totally be made illegal or like punishable by torture or something. I don't know, but I don't remember Fear Effect having like sanity effects, because it's like fear is different from sanity, right? So
I could have
Nintendo's
sworn
patent.
though things got weird though if you let your fear get too high.
They had an EKG and
Right.
and Fear Effect.
Okay, so
You
it wasn't
take
really
more
sanity.
damage.
It's been a long time since
it was
I
more
played
like
that
you had
game.
to calm yourself down. Like that's what it was. So.
Clock Tower 3 did the same thing. It's like the more afraid you are, then like if you max out your fear meter, then you die in one hit. But you can take more damage if you manage your fear.
So Eternal Darkness was what prompted this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean they're basically just like trademarking that specific system, but you can name it other shit and do similar things.
Yeah.
Right.
But enforcing this patent would probably be PR suicide.
I mean, no, Nintendo's not afraid of PR. I feel like they're incapable of even thinking they could commit PR suicide after shutting down so many fan projects.
Like, what is it? AM2R? Is that what it was called?
Yeah. And it's amazing.
Because it got out before they C&D'd it, right?
Yeah, I've played it. It's a phenomenal Metroid game.
I gotta play that.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it's just like classic Metroid. Little bit of like elements from Metroid Fusion, but primarily Super Metroid. Italian kiss. Mwah.
So I got a question for you guys. This is a question that has plagued me for a long time, and I'm wondering if you guys have an answer, or at least what your opinions are. So many games out there: Mario, Sonic, just Metroid, mostly platformers, but even other franchises. They all have a decent amount of fan games made for them, right? Either mods or fan games, something to that extent.
Yeah.
Metal Gear seems very barren in that respect. It doesn't really have any fan games. I mean, we've got like Merry Gear Solid, which is more of a joke than anything else, but like no one has really made a serious, authentic Metal Gear fan game. Why do you think that is?
I disagree to an extent. What was that game that you were telling us about?
Volume.
That was essential. Volume, right? That is a Metal Gear fan game.
Okay,
right?
so but it's so far detached. And I mean, you look at like how many Sonic or Mario fan games are there, for example?
Well, there's a game called I think it's called Forbidden Planet, I think. And it essentially
and that's a Sonic like, yeah.
Right. So it's like a Sonic clone, Sonic like, but I get that your meaning is like essentially like, I don't want to say copyright infringement, because like not commercial, not meant to be sold,
right?
But like, hey, I made this because it has the characters, essentially video game fanfic, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah. So if you clarify that, then yeah, Metal Gear doesn't have a lot, and I wonder if it's because of the fan base thinking that like only Kojima can do this. And
you think that might be it?
I think it's just a case of programmatically, it's just easier to make a platformer fan game than it probably is to make, a stealth mechanic game. I mean,
so you think it's a matter of sophistication?
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
So why wouldn't there be more 2D Metal Gear games? Or do you think most of the fandom kind of came out of the 3D era?
No, I don't think so. I think if you're dedicated enough to make a fan game, you do a 2D game.
So then
I've
why
seen a
aren't
couple
they?
of like works in progresses, but that's literally about it.
Yeah, I've seen
Right.
people like trying to duplicate the Ghost Babel engine, for example.
Yeah, pretty much. That's about where it stops.
Right.
But I think you were right with the sophistication of it all. It's just there's so many things going into Metal Gear that's what, like trying to say this is my version of it, when it's just it's another stealth game. You know, that's not really the case.
I think the most
Go.
sophisticated, I guess, fan game I've ever seen was that like really bad Half-Life game. It came out recently. I think Super Bunny.
Black Mesa? Wait, did you say Black Mesa?
Not
Oh,
Black
okay.
Mesa, no.
Black Mesa.
I know which one you're talking about. Was it like Return to something or
It was like Release the Freeman or something like that.
Right.
Hunt
Towards,
Down
like,
the Freeman?
Hunt Down the Freeman.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the closest thing I've seen towards like a fan trying to recreate a sophisticated sort of game system. And while I think the person who did this had more nefarious intent. It just kind of goes to show, like, if somebody tries to do something like that, it could probably come out like a hot mess. You were talking about Valve's response to Hunt Down the Freeman, which I'm really curious about because it is still on it's still on the Steam store, right?
Yeah, so here's the cool thing about Valve is that you can, if you want a Half-Life 3, you can make it and you can sell it. So they're not going to make it, but Black Mesa is an indie project. Mm-hmm. Hunt Down the Freeman, these are all things that are like clearly Half-Life, but they haven't been taken down. With a Metal Gear fan game, Konami is going to do everything they can to shut those projects down. So I'm sure there have been millions of Metal Gear fan games. And in fact, you can go on YouTube and some guy recreated Metal Gear Solid's opening in the Unreal Engine.
Oh, right.
And then there was the guy who recreated PT in the Unity engine.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, he got shut down hardcore. But
that's probably a factor, yeah.
Yeah, he says he reports that he was offered an internship at Konami because of that, but still, like, they're going to shut those projects down. And part of the problem too is that as soon as someone reports on it, that's when it gets shut down. So
exactly,
yeah, which is annoying.
Valve probably has the best attitude towards fan games I have ever seen from a company. Short of maybe id, where they just were like, "Hey, you like Doom? Here's the source code."
Yeah, no, that's some of the coolest stuff ever. Making your source code available, but mod tools are cool too. And I guess I don't know. Are the characters from Half-Life? I don't even know if they have any copyrights on them because
I don't know.
If Valve won't enforce the copyrights, like some lawyer somewhere would, and so.
One example of a fan game that I saw recently, there's been a team of fans working on their own version of what they think Mother 4 would be. Have you seen this?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it looks just crazy impressive. But I guess maybe they sort of felt like the noose tightening, and so they renamed it. They had all that good faith they built up, but then they've switched. They've switched gears, and now they're calling it Oddity, and it's detached from Earthbound. But yeah, they were able to kind of keep all that good faith and all their work just by developing it one way, and then once they kind of felt everything tightening, they switched gears, and now it's a standalone thing. But everybody really knows what it is. A lot of these laws, I feel, are far too draconian, stifling creativity. Some of them make sense. I mean, you shouldn't be. Yeah, China. That's a can of worms in itself.
Spoderman.
Yeah.
I bought a pack of 6 Spaderman at a flea market one time, and they were all it said Spaderman on the package. There was a picture of Spider-Man right there, but the actual figures were Power Rangers.
Yeah, it's the Wild West with
Oh, that's
copyright
fantastic. Well,
Right,
they just don't
so-
care.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't care. It's more like no one can do anything about it
Yeah,
because
it's like volume.
Yeah, because those copyrights are for the country that they're filed in. Like it's and I guess China doesn't have the extradition laws, so they can't be enforced. So
what are you gonna
whatever.
do?
Yeah. So if you want to make a fan game, I mean, cool. That right. AM2R I think is great, but there's
if they had changed the name and changed the characters but kept it functionally the same.
Which is exactly what someone did. There's a game on Steam called Axiom Verge. It is literally
I've seen that.
It is Metroid, right? But it's not Metroid.
Is it pretty good?
It looks amazing. It's on my wish list. I haven't had a chance to pick it up. I've been playing other things.
It's hard.
Same.
It's hard as shit.
I guess they just announced a sequel back in December.
Yeah. So again, if you want to make a fan game, do it without breaking the law.
Still, it's just kind of strange to me that there aren't more things. There are plenty of games you can look at and say, okay, well, this was inspired by Metal Gear in these respects, but there's nothing like other than that one that we mentioned. Like,
right.
You've got Volume in the serious, and then you've got, Mary Gear Solid in the parody. But that's
right.
it. Like, no one has done anything beyond that that is obviously inspired by Metal Gear to that degree.
Have you guys seen that
unless I'm just missing it.
Have you guys seen that Outer Heaven fan animation?
Yeah. That is crazy good.
Right.
Oh, Mitchell Hammond?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Shout out to Mitchell Hammond for that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been working on that for like the past
forever,
5 or 6 years, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy how good of a job he's doing just by himself.
So speaking of fan projects, I've been wanting to mention this for a while, but I was waiting for the right time, and I think this is it. Were you guys aware that the Blouse himself he had tried to do a spiritual successor to Police Knots and Snatcher?
Yeah, it was. He had a Kickstarter, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did. And I had no idea that it was Jeremy Blaustein until I went back and looked and was like, oh shit, that was Blaustein that was trying to do that.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the project was, like Blackmore or something like that.
It was Blackmore. Yeah, okay. That's right.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that didn't hit its goal.
Yeah.
I hope he goes back to it.
I threw as much money as I could at it, but it needed a whole hell of a lot more.
Yeah, game dev's not cheap.
Yeah.
Because it was like going to be like a steampunk adventure, right?
Right. Truthfully, the resources just weren't there. There was a lot of stuff you had Jeremy Blaustein, and it was like he was banking his entire campaign on the name recognition. Hopefully, you'll know that I was the translator for MGS1, but
a lot of people don't.
Yeah. And I sure didn't at the time. This was 2013. I was in Japan. And I didn't find out about Jeremy Blaustein until a long time later. But now I'm looking back and I still tried my I was willing to invest in that game. And I've put money into like at least 100 Kickstarter campaigns over the years. And then, sometimes they work out. In fact, based on what I've seen, most of the time they work out, but that was one that it was doomed to fail from the beginning.
What do you think, just in your opinion, prevented it from taking off?
So one, they were missing a lot of key staff. They didn't have a proof of concept. And if you're doing a game project on Kickstarter, if you're not a mega giant or like a relatively well-known studio like Double Fine or In Exile or Obsidian, and you have that pedigree, then because that's what is bringing people to your campaign is, all right, what have you done in the past? I want to see more of that. So like the Double Fine Kickstarter didn't show anything. They hadn't even had a concept for a game, and they still were able to bring in $3 million. But for
Just saw
Blackmore,
Tim Schafer's name, though. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Blackmore had a couple of screenshots, and that was about it.
They weren't even screenshots. They were untextured 3D models on top of like 2D environment, 2D concept art. And
it's
and
just not enough to show people something to get people like excited, really.
Right. Yeah. They needed a whole hell of a lot more stuff there, but they also had like staff that they were going to need. They didn't have a lead programmer. They didn't have a lead game designer. All they had was like, hey, if you give us the money, then we'll hire these people.
And you need more than that.
I think David Hayter was on board to do a voice in the game.
I remember that now. Yup.
Yeah.
He was. I think he was like advertising it on Twitter, right?
I think so. He must have. Yeah. He was doing his best to create awareness. He did wind up in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, so not all is lost.
And he also had Satoshi Yoshioka, who did art for Snatcher and Police Knots.
Yeah. It's just, but there was just still a ton of people that needed to be there that weren't at that stage. Yeah. So
I'd like to see him do it to take another crack at it. Develop it out, get a concept put together.
Yeah.
Rely on a little more than name recognition, because a lot of to us these names mean something,
right?
But to a mass audience, most people don't know, and while that's a shame, it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, now that you say that, I feel like maybe the biggest thing that hindered that campaign was Kojima wasn't involved. I feel like if he were attached to or had even endorsed the project in any way.
I don't know if they still keep in touch or not.
No, but it was trying to be a spiritual successor to Police Knots and Snatcher, but it wasn't really connected to that original creation. It was just a guy who did some translating work, helming the project, and they needed a bigger name. Maybe if David Hayter himself had done the pitch video, it might have turned out differently.
He did do a video for it, if I remember right, but he was like doing it in his car or something.
What's up with David Hayter and Cam Clark doing videos from their car as they're about to go to Taco Bell?
They should do it forever. Did you see the Cam Clark? I know we're going on here, but did you see the Cam Clark video where he pulls up at like Taco Bell?
Yeah. Yeah. What's up with that? What's up with these guys in Taco Bell?
I don't know, but I love that. Oh man. So closing remarks.
Fourth wall good, break it all day, forever.
Thanks, Kojima, for playing into my childhood nightmares.
Playing us like a damn fiddle.
So the best wall is a fourth wall, and the best fourth wall is a broken one.
I like that.
Here we go.
Somebody should put that on a fortune cookie. I like it.